Imagine this. You wake up one morning and realize your entire career, your whole claim to power, wealth, and survival depends on what happens when the king goes to the bathroom. Yes, you heard me. Forget battles, forget councils, forget royal banquets. Your most important duty is crouching beside the throne, not the golden one, but the wooden one with a hole in it. You are the groom of the stool. It sounds like the punchline of a bad joke, but in Tudor England, this was one of the most influential positions in the entire kingdom. Your job? Assist the king in his most private and most vulnerable moment, when he relieved himself. You don't just hand him the linen cloth. You manage the royal bowels. You monitor his diet. You keep track of the king's health through the quality, color, and texture of his waist. In other words, you are the king's personal poop manager. Shocking? Absolutely. Disgusting? Without question. But here's the twist. This wasn't a lowly task. This position, foul as it sounds, gave you unparalleled access to the king. When other nobles fought and schemed for a whisper of royal attention, you got to be there when the king was most exposed. And in those vulnerable moments, secrets spilled as easily as the contents of his chamber pot. So what does it mean to live your life as the royal toilet assistant? How do you balance unimaginable humiliation with unimaginable power? And what dark truths lurked in the stench of Tudor bathrooms? Tonight, you're not a bystander in history. You're not flipping through a textbook. You're stepping into the wooden stool itself. For the next 20 minutes, you are the groom of the stool. You will kneel beside Henry VIII. You will hold your breath when Elizabeth I glances at you with suspicion. You will see the very things no courtier, no ambassador, no general was ever allowed to see. And yes, you'll get your hands dirty. So buckle up, because history isn't all crowns and castles. Sometimes, history smells like the king's chamber pot. To understand how you ended up in this bizarre position, we need to step back into the world of Tudor England. Picture this. It's the early 1500s, and England is a kingdom of damp castles, smoky halls, and a court buzzing with ambition. Everyone wants to get closer to the king. Why? Because proximity equals power. If you're near the monarch, you might influence his choices. If you're far away, you might as well not exist. But the king is not easy to reach. He is surrounded by guards, advisors, and strict protocols. Every letter he reads, every word he hears, is filtered by layers of courtiers. Unless you're with him in a place no one else dares to intrude. A place where his crown is off, his sword is set aside, and his dignity is, well, compromised. Enter the groom of the stool. The title itself sounds laughable, but it was deadly serious. The stool was a padded wooden chair with a chamber pot built inside. And the groom was the one who attended the king in this most private ritual. On the surface, it looks humiliating. You're literally helping the king use the bathroom. But look deeper. You are the only person allowed in the room. When the door closes, it's just you and him. No spies, no rivals, no enemies. This intimacy gave you something no general could buy with victories, no noble could secure with marriage, no priest could claim with sermons. Trust. You were the silent witness to the king's humanity. You knew his weaknesses, his pains, even his illnesses. After all, in a world without modern medicine, examining the king's output was one of the few ways to track his health. You became part valet, part doctor, part confidant, and kings knew this. Henry VIII, famous for his 6 wives and larger-than-life ego, treated his grooms of the stool like close advisors. The men who held that job, like Sir Anthony Denny, weren't mocked. They became some of the most powerful figures in the court. Their influence came not despite their role, but because of it. If you're helping the king in his most vulnerable moment, he might just trust you with his most dangerous secrets. So while the job may have started as something practical, it evolved into one of the strangest paradoxes in history. The dirtier the work, the closer you were to the throne. And now, imagine it's you. You've been chosen, maybe as a reward, maybe as a test. From today forward, your life belongs to the king's most private chamber. The great gamble begins. Will this job make you powerful, or will it destroy you in humiliation? Now, imagine it's you. You've been selected, whether by luck, by family connections, or by sheer misfortune, to serve as the groom of the stool. From this moment on, your life is no longer your own. Every hour, every breath revolves around one man, the king. You wake before dawn. The palace is still dark, cold drafts sweeping through stone corridors. Servants scurry quietly, lighting torches, polishing boots, preparing trays of bread and ale. But your duties are unlike anyone else's. You don't polish armor. You don't deliver messages. You prepare the king's privy chamber. You check the stool itself, a sturdy wooden chair with a velvet cushion and a removable chamber pot underneath. Yes, it sounds absurd, but this chair is as important to the king as his throne in the Great Hall. You ensure the linens are fresh, the basin clean, the perfumes ready to mask what perfumes can never truly mask. Every detail matters, because when the king comes in, nothing must break the illusion of control. Even in this act of nature, majesty must be maintained. Then the knock comes. Guards step aside. The king enters. And suddenly it's just the two of you. The man everyone else fears, the man whose signature can start wars or end lives, looks at you with weary eyes. He sits, and you, attend. Awkward? Beyond words. But you learn quickly that showing disgust or even surprise is dangerous. You school your face into neutrality, nod politely, and listen. Because here's the secret. The stool isn't just where the king relieves himself. It's where he talks. Think about it. When else is he this unguarded? Surrounded by enemies, flattered by courtiers, threatened by foreign ambassadors, he is always on stage. But here, with you, the mask slips. He sighs. He complains. He tells you of the ache in his leg, the food that upset his stomach, the treachery he suspects in the council. And you, holding a linen cloth, become the only man alive to hear the king's secrets while he is most vulnerable. You're not just his bathroom attendant, you're his confidant. You hear him curse his wives in private, long before he dares voice it in court. You hear his doubts about alliances, his fear of rebellion, his private jokes that could ruin reputations if spoken aloud elsewhere. Every word is a weapon, and you are the keeper of the arsenal. But power like this comes with a cost. The other courtiers know your role. Some laugh at you behind their sleeves, whispering about your dirty work. Others envy you, realizing that you have the king's ear more often than they do. At banquets, you feel their stares. To some, you are the butt of every joke. To others, you are a rival who must be watched, and perhaps eliminated. And then there's the king himself. Imagine serving Henry VIII in his later years, when his body was riddled with ulcers, when every movement caused pain, when his temper could ignite like wildfire. To attend him was to endure sights and smells you can never forget, yet you dared not flinch, because one grimace could be taken as mockery. One look of disgust could be interpreted as treason. Still, you endure, day after day, night after night. You carry the chamber pot discreetly, hand him clean cloths, murmur reassurances, and nod as though this were the most natural thing in the world. And somehow, amid the filth, you begin to see the strange truth. This job makes you indispensable. When ambassadors seek influence, they come to you with gifts, hoping you'll whisper their names into the king's ear during his private moments. When nobles plot against each other, they fear what you might have overheard. You are mocked for your duty, yes, but you are also feared for your access. In this twisted world of Tudor politics, you, yes, you, the groom of the stool, are both servant and power broker. You smell the king's worst, but you touch the kingdom's best-kept secrets. At night, when you return to your quarters, you lie awake, torn between pride and shame. Part of you hates the role, the humiliation, the endless stink that clings to your clothes. But another part of you knows this position could elevate your family, secure your fortune, maybe even shape the course of England itself. Because in the end, history is often decided not in battles or parliaments, but in whispers exchanged where no one dares to listen. And you, holding the royal chamber pot, are the listener. One evening, the palace is buzzing. The council has been divided over a treaty, rumors swirl about a noble family plotting rebellion, and the king's temper is at its peak. You, as always, wait in the privy chamber. The stool is prepared, the linen folded neatly, the chamber pot polished like a relic. The guards step aside. The king stomps in, his face red with rage and wine. He slams the door. Suddenly it's just you and him again. The chamber is silent except for his heavy breathing. He sits, muttering curses under his breath. Then he speaks to you, not to his advisors, not to his queen, not to his generals, to you. And what he tells you is dangerous. He leans forward, his voice low, spitting words between grimaces of pain. He names a man he suspects of betrayal. He describes the punishment he will unleash. He reveals strategies that, if whispered beyond this room, could shatter alliances or spark civil war. And you, holding a cloth, kneeling in a room that smells of sweat and worse, are the only person to hear it. Your heart pounds. You realize the paradox of your life. You're surrounded by filth, yet you sit closer to the throne of power than any noble in silk. You are the king's waist attendant, but you're also his secret keeper, his confessor, his human diary. But secrets are heavy, too heavy. One day, a rival courtier corners you in a shadowy hallway. He smiles politely, but his words drip with menace. What does His Majesty say when he's alone with you? He asks, sliding a purse of coins into your hand. Another approaches you later, promising land, titles, favors, anything, if you'll just share a whisper from the stool. You realize everyone knows your position isn't just about hygiene. It's about information. And in a court as cutthroat as Tudor England, information is life or death. Do you betray the king? Of course not. At least, not openly. But the temptation gnaws at you. One wrong word, even spoken carelessly, could destroy you. If the king suspects your loyalty wavers, you won't just lose your job, you'll lose your head. The absurdity of it all would almost be funny if it weren't so terrifying. You, the groom of the stool, are simultaneously the most ridiculed servant and one of the most dangerous men in the kingdom. Imagine the irony. Dukes and bishops bow and scrape for an audience, while you, with a chamber pot in hand, command more trust than all of them. Yet power this intimate is volatile. What if the king grows tired of you? What if he interprets or silence as disloyalty, your discretion as judgment? What if, in a drunken rage, he decides the man who knows too much must vanish? The stool becomes a throne of paranoia. Each time you kneel, you wonder, is this the moment when the king, relieved and suspicious, decides your usefulness has ended? You live in constant fear, balanced on the edge between influence and execution. One slip, one grimace, one rumor, and your life could end not in glory, but in disgrace, remembered only as the man who wiped the royal backside and died for it. And so, your story as groom of the stool comes full circle. You began as a servant mocked for the dirtiest duty in the realm, yet you rose to become one of the king's closest confidants. You held the chamber pot, yes, but you also held the ear of the most powerful man in England. Your life was a strange cocktail of humiliation and influence, secrecy and danger. History remembers kings like Henry VIII for their wars, their wives, their crowns of gold. But hidden in the margins is you, the man who knelt beside the stool, who endured the stench, who heard the whispers no chronicler ever dared to write. Your role was grotesque, yet essential. You were both invisible and indispensable. And what's the lesson? That power doesn't always sit on thrones or wear crowns. Sometimes it crouches in the shadows, carrying a linen cloth. Sometimes the dirtiest jobs are the ones closest to the truth. So, what about you? Would you trade your 9 to 5 today for a chance at that strange mix of filth and influence? Would you risk becoming a joke in exchange for secrets that could topple kingdoms? Comment below whose life you want to live next. Subscribe if you want more dark and hilarious slices of history. And remember, sometimes history stinks, literally.